So in this session, we will create the background of the Pacman game. How does the background of Pacman game look like? Let's take a look. Background of Pacman game, which we are going to create, looks something like this. Okay, so as you can see here, it has got many dots in a one row. The dots are repeated in the next row and then so on. So how many dots are there altogether? There are 15 dots in a row and 15 rows together. So how many dots we are talking about? We are talking about 15 multiplied by 15, that is 225 dots. So how do we create these 225 dots? Are we going to create 225 sprites for it? No, we have already learned the concepts of arrays and for loop. We will use the concept of array and for loop to create this background. So dots, we will use array and for loop. What about these bars or these walls? We have around 40-45 walls here that you can put according to the maze that you want to use. So here you can use your imagination how you want your Pacman game to look like. This is according to my imagination and this is how I have put the bars. One thing you will have to make sure when you are creating the maze, there has to be a way for your Pacman to move along. It should not stuck anywhere. So what you can do, you can also refer the image of the maze from internet and referring it, you can try to put your walls. So let's get started. Okay, the first thing is open a new project in Game Lab. Rename it. Renaming is very important. So I will rename it to Pacman Game Part 1. Or we can say Pacman background. We are creating the background of Pacman game. And what do I want? For this background, I need a dot. So first thing what I will do, I will create a new animation. I will draw it myself. Small dot. It is simple to draw and color it. So I will pick the yellow color. That is the typical color the dots of Pacman game have. Or maybe we can give them pink also. But we will go with yellow dots here. Okay, so this is fine. This yellow looks okay. We will create a solid circle of yellow color. Crop it and we are good with our dot. I will rename it to dot so that, it looks reasonable. So yes, we know first thing we will have to create a dot sprite. So let's create a dot sprite. Maybe at 200 and 200 position and draw a sprite. Let's see how we are seeing it, how much scale we want to do it. And then we will start putting all the sprites together. So dot set animation. Okay, so let's scale it. Let me scale it to 0.3 and I will see if it is okay or not. Okay, looks good to me. Now next, what do we want? We do not want to create only this one sprite. We want to create multiple dots. We want to create 15 rows of 15 dots each. So what we will do? We will use for loop here. We will use for loop and we will say for a variable I is equals to 0. I is less than 15. Why 15? Because we want 15 dots to be created. I plus plus. I plus plus means every time this for loop is executed, the value of I will increase by 1. So what do I want when this has happened? I want to create multiple dots, dot sprite. So when we are talking about multiple dot sprite, first thing what we will have to do, we will have to create an array that can hold all these multiple sprites. And we know, by now we know that this is the way to create an array. So I have created an array dots. I removed the earlier code because that was something I had just put in for the experiment purpose. If my dot is looking okay or not, we don't need it because all the sprites we will be creating inside this for. Okay, so first let's create this first row. Okay, we will first create this first row. We will start putting up this first row. So create the first, maybe I can define two variables as x value and y value. So dot x and dot y. And we can initialize it to 25, which means my first dot will be created at 25 position. So I have defined these two variables. Now I will start putting the dots. We will need one more variable, count. Why we will need this variable? This will hold the index of my arrays. So how we will do? We will say dots count means on this array, create a sprite at the 0th index. Why 0th index? Because at this moment, the value of count is 0. Create a sprite. At what position? Dot x and dot y. So dot x comma dot y. We want to create a sprite and we want to give it an animation also. So consider now this dots count is the name of your sprite. You can give it a animation. We gave it an animation and now we will scale it. We have already seen how much scale we want to do it. So we will scale it to 0.3. Okay. So we have created a dots sprite, which is stored at the 0th index of this array. We have given it an animation and we have scaled it also. What next? Next, when I want to create the row of sprites, I want this count to increase by 1. I will increase every time I will increase the value of this count by 1. What does it mean? First time when my dot will be created, the dot sprite will be created. It will store in dots array where at 0th index. Next time it will be stored at first index, second index and so on. So this is how we are storing all the dots sprite inside a dots array. Okay, so if we run it, what will happen? Actually, if we run it, the 15 dots will be created, but all the 15 dots will be created at the same position because we are not changing the dot x and dot y. So what we will do now? Now we will change the position of dot x. Why only dot x? Because we want to create this first sprite, which is this sprite. This is my second sprite. So here, if I want to create this first row, if I want to create this first row here, my x position is changing, but my y position is same. So here x is 25, then it becomes for the second dot, it becomes 50. Then for the third dot, it becomes 75, 100 and so on. So what I will do here, we will increase the value of dot x by 25 with every execution. So let's run it and see. Okay, I'm seeing some errors. So let me correct it quickly. Sorry, that was a very silly mistake. But yes, whenever you see some yellow triangles, you need to see if it is something valid, you need to consider or you can probably ignore it. So let me reset and run it. Okay, so we have one row created. What next? We want the other rows also to be created. But when I want this next row to be created, what will change? The value of y will also change. Now this time, because we are going downwards, the value of y will become 50. And here, the value of x will keep on increasing. So what we will have to do? We will have to put in a nested for loop here. What is a nested for loop? A for loop inside a for loop is called a nested for loop. So what does it mean? In one for loop, we are creating this entire row of dots. Okay, so this is my one for loop, which we wrote just now. This is my one for loop. We have created, sorry for the handwriting, I'm so sorry. So this we have already created. This is my one row of dots. Now we will use another for loop. The second for loop to create this row. The third for loop to create this row. But again, are we supposed to write 15 for loops for these 15 rows? No, we are not supposed to. What we will do the same thing. We will use another for loop. So I'm going to write another for loop. This time I'm going to use the variable j because we have already used. You can give it, any other name also, but we can't reuse j again. We can't reuse I again because otherwise it will mess up the entire logic. So, okay, so with this, my first row will be created. dot x has to be inside. So with this nested for loop, my first row will be created. And when it comes out of this for loop, it will start executing this outer for loop second time. Means it will create the second row. Now, when we want the second row to be created, what we will have to do? We will also have to increase the value of y by 25. Okay, so understand what we are doing here. This inner loop is actually creating my one row of dots. Okay, when the value of I is 1, this whole loop is executing 15 times and creating 15 dots in one row. Why it is coming in one row? Because we have not changed inside this, we have not changed the value of dot y. Value of dot y is always 25, which is its initialization value. What we have changed, we are changing the value of dot x so that every time it is being laid down in a row. When one row is done, what do? We should actually again initialize the value of dot x to 25. I will do it now. And also increase the value of dot y by 25. So let me do that correction as well. So next time again my x becomes 25. So I will have to say here dot x is equals to 25 because with the first row it has become something else, 25 plus 25 plus 25. Maybe it will be around 375 or 350 at the end. So we want to reset this value. So let me reset and run it and see if it has been created. So yes, we have all 225 dots created with this just few lines of code. Okay, so I hope you understand. If not, you can follow the video again and comment me if you have any question. So for your understanding purpose, let me repeat it again. With the first for loop, we create with this inside nested for loop, we are creating one single row. This row is being created. And when this row is being created, what do? We increase the value of dot y by 25. Why? Because we want to create the next row, which is at the dot y 25 position. So this is actually being placed, this entire row. For this entire row, the value of y coordinate is 25. I mean 25 plus 25, that is 50. And for first row, it was 25. And this is the value which we have initialized. So for next row, we are every time increasing the value of dot by 25. And we are resetting the value of dot x as 25 because my first dot has to be at 25 position. Then 50, then 75, which this nested loop will take care of. So actually my nested loop, how many times this loop will execute? First time this will execute 15 times. Okay. And then when my outer loop is executing second time, it will again execute 15 times. And when my outer loop is executing third time, again 50 times. So my inner loop is executing 15 times. Each time my outer loop is executing. And my outer loop is also executing 15 times. So altogether this inner nested loop will actually execute 15 multiplied by 15 times and will create the dots accordingly. I hope I made it clear. If you still have any confusion, please don't hesitate to ping me or share your queries in the comments. What is the next step? Yes, I want to give it a nice background for Pacman game. Traditionally, it is navy blue, so I will keep it navy blue. If you want, you can change it. Okay, so navy blue is not working. So let me try with dark blue. If you want, you can use RGB codes as well. Yes, so dark blue is working. We will go with dark blue. If you want the perfect color, use RGB. I believe you know how to use RGB. So what is the next step? We have already created the matrix of dots. Now we will start creating the walls. Yes, it is going to be very tedious task because here we can't use for loop. We cannot use for loop to create these walls. Why? Because there is no fixed pattern. The length of all the walls may vary. Their positions are random. So what we will have to do? We will have to take help from a maze. or use your imagination, how you want to start putting up your walls. So say for example, first I want to put up this maze. Let me erase all this. So first, say for example, if I want to put up these two lines, this one and this one. So, or what we can do first, probably we can put up this middle bar, this entire left section, and then we will try to replicate it towards right also. Okay.